Tim Sullivan, welcome along to Screenjabber. Nice to have you here.
Nice to be here, thank you.
Have you always been a keen fan of horror films?
Absolutely. I can tell you, it's so bizarre, I actually know the date it all began. It was December 12th, 1969. I was 5 years old, and back then they only had 7 channels on television. It wasn't like today where there's 800 and nothing's good. But and I used to ask my mother what was on, and I would always count in my head how many shows she was telling me. If there was less than the amount of channels I knew existed, I knew there was something she didn't want me to see. I was very precocious. So one day she did that, and I counted it down, and I finally got out of her that this movie called Dracula was going to be on a show called Creature Features. This was back in New Jersey, America, and just the fact that she didn't want me to see it made me need to experience Dracula. And I wore her down, and finally I saw it, and I was captivated. It frightened me and seduced me at the same time. I was both, afraid of it and just hypnotized by it. And then I started would take my blanket and run around. I was Dracula, and I knew that how I wanted to have that experience again and again. And then it was just synchronicity. It was like the world all came together at once. 2 weeks later, I discovered Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine. Then I went flipping through channels and found Dark Shadows television show with Barnabas Collins on, the original Vampire Goth soap opera. And then I started finding these monster models at the store. And the thing that was so amazing about Famous Monsters is, I was 5 and then 6. I realized that there are people who make these movies. They don't just appear. There's such a thing as a job making monster movies, because Famous Monsters would talk about, the Jack Pierces, the makeup artists, the Lon Chaneys, the Ray Harryhausens, the Willis O'Briens, the Terrence Fishers, the Alfred Hitchcocks. I was like, wait a minute, this is a job? How come they don't mention that job in school? It's always career day. It's fireman, policeman. There's no monster man. And just from that moment on, I just knew I wanted to be a monster movie maker. And, and I took many different routes getting here, from being a magician, which really led to my love of in-camera special effects, because so many of the techniques are the same. And then that led to me being a journalist. I wrote for Fangoria magazine. I also wrote for the music news for MTV. All that stuff came together to here I am.
Some of your favourite films of the past year?
It's very exciting. I mean, it's interesting because after a year, what I thought was the worst year for horror, because the mainstream was really bad. All the treasures are, because I was very busy this year working on Scream Queens and working on Field of Screams. But all the real treasures have all been coming out on DVD, and this has turned out to be one of the best years, 2009. My top favorite is House of the Devil. I mean, especially when you make films, it's hard to be scared by them because you sort of know all the tricks. I was terrified. One night, Ty West, I got a copy of it, and I was watching it alone, and I was riveted and terrified. It didn't feel like a film that was a homage to the 70s. It felt like someone had actually found an unreleased film and put it out.
I know, it's amazing how they managed to recreate
everything
that
about
sensation.
It. The look of the film, the pace of the film, just absolutely brilliant. A film that doesn't just bang you over the head from the opening moment. So after a while, if you have too much effects and violence, you become numb to it, and I don't think that last 20 minutes would quite have the impact it had if it had that level and pace of violence.
It does build and build and build.
And Tom Noonan, I mean, he's been doing it forever between the original Hannibal Lecter and Frankenstein and Monster Squad, but to me, this is one of the greatest icon horror performances ever. And that was, up there. The other gem that I love is my friend Dave Parker did a film called The Hills Run Red.
Yes.
Which,
fantastic film.
It's just great style and great panache. And again, a film that was better than it had any business being in terms of, the DVD premiere, they Warner Brothers, just give us some blood and guts and tits and ass, and a premise that started out very familiar, and then 30 minutes in, Dave just completely turned it on its head. Another fantastic performance by, oh my God, who's Bill Sadler. Another great villainous performance. I mean, Hills Run Red, House of the Devil. Another film, Trick or Treat.
Loved it. That was the hit of Fright Fest last August.
Mike Dougherty, another friend of mine. It's so wonderful. We've all been in the trenches together. So to start seeing people finally getting their movies made and having them be so well received and well executed, the bottom line is the best stuff in horror is being made outside the studio systems. And it just bothers me that direct, like the remake of Friday the 13th, will get 3,000 screens and make $80 million. House of the Devil and Hills Run Red and Trick or Treat have to fight for their audience. But the difference is that audience, once it's won over, is passionate and Friday the 13th will be in the is already forgotten. Whereas these other films will just grow, and they're the type of film that everybody says you have to see it and let me lend it to you, and we'll be hearing a lot more from all these films. Paranormal Activity was, quote, my favorite sort of mainstream film, but it isn't a mainstream film. It just got a mainstream release. It was a film that I guess was actually premiered at Fright Fest a while ago, and didn't get a distribution. It was something that people in Hollywood were passing around for a year before it came out. And it was one of those things, I even think it was Joe Lynch who said to me, Tim, you got to watch this. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. Make sure you're not distracted and just watch it. It terrified me. I mean, I'm skeptical of I'm so kind of tired of the Blair Witch ripoffs, the Cloverfield, this is a documentary, and some are done really well, but most are just like gimmicks, and but Paranormal Activity was not a gimmick. I mean, it was such, again, like Frozen, such a simple idea, but no one else came up with it. No one else did it. And
half the trick is coming up with the right idea, isn't it?
Yes, and I think that after a sort of a plague of torture porn, it was so refreshing to get back to what scares me the most in horror films, and that is the supernatural and the paranormal. And there was another film that came out last year. It was okay. It was called A Haunting in Connecticut. But to me, the two of them represent the extremes. Haunting in Connecticut is so overdone with the CGI that it's very hard to be terrible. I mean, you may jump, but there's a difference between jumping and being ill at ease. You can pop a balloon and you'll get an audience to jump. And with Haunting in Connecticut, with all the overdone special CGI, it was just like, okay. But then here's Paranormal Activity, and all I'm literally looking at is a bedroom. And
a door that moves by itself.
Yeah. And what the fuck is going on in that other room? And you're looking at it and you're thinking, did I just see a shadow? And then that ending. I actually prefer the original ending that was passed around, because I know, again, the very end, they went for that CGI final exclamation point, and it was effective, but for me, it wasn't as organic to the film as the original ending, which, was much more in line with this is real footage. But it did, and I went and saw it again in the theater, and it was just a great experience. After a summer of Transformers and G.I. Joe, of these mind-numbing, cut-a-minute movies, I was like, wow, an audience can actually sit very riveted at a film that just takes its time. You just have, and it was refreshing.